We have the ability to support multi-tenancy with UCS Director. We can put different resources into different groups and enforce different policies or cost models or cost consumption around those different resources. We can also provide separate portals and separate catalogs for different groups of users. This is all controlled by the UCS Director administrators and the policy model that UCS Director employs. What we do in this circumstance is we actually create what we call a virtual data center. A virtual data center is a place to group these devices and apply policies to them as we allow users to pull resources from those virtual data centers. So for instance, we define a storage policy, a network policy, a compute policy, and possibly even a system and cost model policy. And then we create our VDC and apply those policies to that individual VDC. We then give users and groups access to that VDC. This gives you an idea how some of these objects relate to each other. As we mentioned before, we may have storage policies, network policies, and compute policies, or some of these other cost models, etc., that go into a virtual data center. A virtual data center is a way to group resources inside of UCS Director. You could have 15 virtual data centers, or you could have 2. It just depends on how you want to control those resources, or whether you have, for instance, different cost models to apply to different resources. An easy example of this would be a production virtual data center, a test, and a development data center. Now, each virtual data center can only be assigned to a single group, but you can have multiple groups inside of UCS Director, and a group can have access to more than one data center. You can also have multiple users in your UCS Director system, like you would expect. We can import those users from Active Directory and then apply those users to groups and assign resources based on those groups. By default, all users come in from Active Directory as end users, and you have to elevate their permissions from there, for instance, if you want them to be an administrator. We also assign the catalogs that you have access to, or the workflows that you have access to, based on the catalogs and which groups those catalogs belong to. And finally, we can apply budgets and resource limits to groups as well. So the costs of specific resources is actually assigned to the virtual data centers, but the budgets and the resource limits are assigned to groups. Let's take a look really quick at what it looks like if I'm an end user logging in to UCS Director. For this first example, I'm going to just log in as a typical user. As you can see, after logging in, I have access to 2 catalogs. One is an advanced catalog and one is a standard catalog. The standard catalog basically contains the workflows that came with the system. The advanced catalog contains custom workflows that the administrators design. Here you can see in our standard catalog, I have 2 workflows that create virtual machines. One creates a Linux virtual machine and the other creates a Windows virtual machine. If I look under my advanced catalog, I actually have 2 workflows. One of them creates a VLAN on a network device, and the other one is a workflow that shuts down a virtual machine and then deletes it from vCenter. Now let's take a look at what it looks like when I log in as a different user. As you can see, when I log in as this net admin user, I don't have 2 catalogs anymore, I only have 1. And the catalog that I have is an advanced catalog which contains custom workflows, and in fact I'm using this so I can do things inside of ACI like setting up the network, creating a tenant, adding a layer 4 through 7 device, either managed or unmanaged. So as you could see, I could be 2 users from 2 different business units, 2 different companies. I could be contractor and somebody that works for the company, and I'm only going to see the workflows that I'm allowed to execute against based on the costs and the resource constraints and the catalogs that I have access to. And depending upon that as well, I'm only going to see the virtual machines that I'm administering, the UCS servers that I have access to, for instance, any approvals that I may have pending, approved, or rejected, or any other number of items here along the top. For instance, if I want to check out my virtual resources or my physical resources, these are all resources that I have access to based on the virtual data center that I am accessing those resources from. Please join me for our next lesson, 12.4, Examining UCS Director Chargeback.